It came closer to my leg, lurching forward, with one lashing from its razor-sharp tongue slicing at my skin, close to my groin. As I prayed I'd still have my manhood intact when this was over. That is, if I even survived this mess I was in. It seemed to enjoy the possibility of feasting on my tender flesh. It liked that area more than all the others. It was as if it were getting off on tasting my balls. Its tongue licked my bare skin as I waited for my own death. Then I forgot myself, accidentally hitting play on my Casio. I could hear her sing in my ears, knowing everything would be all right. The end of my life may come, but something about her was how she sounded like she could fight for me with her tenderness, anger, and love of a good guitar riff. God help me, if this was my last moment on earth, I could make myself at ease, even as the pain grabbed me. Unrelenting pain. PJ Harvey is my favorite musician. A monster story. In a time before cell phones, TikTok, YouTube, or Snapchat, there was just MTV blasting out your favorite tunes. Shows like 120 Minutes and Headbangers Ball were at the top of their game, showcasing rare music and rock and roll alternative music. It was often the local Quonset hut, with some clerk at the local wearing hemp and burning Jerry Garcia incense. If it wasn't your local music scene, like bands that my friends were all in, guys that really got it, formed a band called the Rash Scratchers. They'd open for more extensive and badass local bands that opened up for big acts like Live, Dave Matthews Band, often named after words you'd hear about in a psychologist's office, like Paranoid Lovesick. You know, really fucking cool bands. At least that was in the 90s, when I was a teen living in Akron, Ohio, a town everyone calls Akron, when it's just pronounced like Ak-Run. In later years, we've basically been known for LeBron James. However, those in the know remember Devo, Chrissy Hynde of the Pretenders, and in recent years, the Black Keys. Yeah, we got some fun stuff. I tended to go by what my friends listened to or recommended, and my friend Krista didn't like it. Well, then fuck it, I didn't like it either. When I was in college, it was no different. I discovered I liked Tori Amos, but only after hearing Spark for the first time. Before that, I remember breaking up with my girlfriend that was really into Tori Amos at the time, and I spent the entire afternoon throwing her CDs in the air and shooting them with my hunting rifle. I was into British rock bands, but not your typical simp for Oasis. I enjoyed rare groups that 3 people had probably ever heard of. The rarer the band, the cooler they were to me. Granted, as a dad of 3 little girls now, I have long since forgotten those days of yore, when the world was a bit different. A time when you had to actually research things about bands the hard way. People spread rumors about artists back then. There were no social media to create rumors until they canceled everyone you thought you liked. I was 19 when I discovered I loved PJ Harvey. I was living in some little dorm in some shit town at the time on a track scholarship. No, not some fantastic sprinter that played football in the fall and only ran track to keep in shape. No, I was your dorky long-distance runner. I swear to God that the longer the race you ran, the uglier you were. I was pretty ugly too back then. Scrawny, weepy, brown hair, freckles that seemed big and small, covering my body. I looked like a reversed version of the galaxy. My skin was pale and acne filled my cheeks. I had one girlfriend until I was 19. That was when everything changed. I had started some job as a security guard in a shitty company in Cleveland. It was cool because I worked in security, but please do not ask me what the hell the company did, although I got an idea later, but still never understood the purpose of what they did. There were rumors, of course. Information quickly shoved under the rug by Big Brother payouts. All I knew was I got paid pretty decently to come in, sit at a big round desk with a swivel chair, and listen to my CD Walkman. Yes, kids, before Spotify, Amazon Music, or Apple Music, where you have millions of songs at your fingertip, there was the non-skip CD Walkman. It was all the rage when I had first gotten mine. It was geared towards skater punks or active teenagers, and a couple $100. It was probably about a couple $100 cheaper than some of the big versions made. So, I sat in this dump of a museum-type building, Dolce Labs. There was glass all around me, so any bum walking the street that saw me either ignored me or put on a show for me. I once saw a guy shit in the middle of Carnegie and wipe it on the glass. Yeah, fucking gross, right? I often would get people banging on the glass to come in, mostly crazies or druggies. Sometimes if I was feeling particularly empathetic, which wasn't often, I'd buy weed from one of the guys and we'd smoke it in the lobby while he wormed his toes in the below-zero winters. I was hoping you wouldn't ask me to recall his name now all these years later, because I don't remember it. I haven't been there since the night I discovered my love for Polly Jean Harvey. You know, there are moments when you know that if you had taken a different path, your life would be incredibly different. For instance, you could be dead or rich, living on a yacht in the south of France. Forks in the road, as my grandpa would term it. This, however, was one colossal fucking fork in the road. I recall it like it was yesterday. I had arrived early to work because I had already been up that afternoon before noon. It was my best friend's graduation party from her early college program. One of those programs where you can go to college and get a high school credit. So while I was slaving away in the evenings at this shit security job, my friend had already earned her bachelor's degree. At the same time, I was still a college sophomore debating whether or not I wanted to kill myself or get the shitty liberal arts degree. Hindsight is 20/20, they say. So I arrived that afternoon around 3. Most of the office was gone because it was Saturday. Most of the staff only worked till noon, then the building was shut down by 4. So I clocked in, ran to the restroom, and put on my fake police uniform. It was all black, and in yellow on the front it said, "Security." So any dumb motherfucker that tried to mess with me had to face Big John. Yes, sorry about that. My name is John. Although now I'm called Babe, Hun, or Daddy. John is my name. Although I was not an armed security guard, I was given a stick to use in my defense and a button to push under the desk in the lobby in case shit hit the fan. I said goodbye to Eddie, the guy that worked day shift, and as he locked up the building, I settled in with my cheese, crackers, and a big gulp. Most of the later that afternoon was quiet. It was a warm February day, and when the sun went down, I noticed the moon was shining over the building. I mentioned it was made of glass. It was actually pretty at night. I could also see all the city lights and the stars when things settled in on the city. I pulled out a CD my friend Krista made me. Yes, she made it for me. So in a time before playlists on Spotify, you could burn music yourself onto a CD and create your own playlist that way. It was fucking time consuming, so the fact someone would do this for you was the highest of all honors. Krista wasn't my girlfriend. We had never dated, but we had known one another since we were 3.5. I put the CD in my Casio and sat back, closing my eyes. My eyes were closed for about 3 minutes when I heard something near my desk. I opened them and looked over the circular-shaped desk. I didn't see anything, but the monitor on one of the computers in front of me was no longer on. Not too strange. It often happened because whoever paid to have them installed had never had any maintenance done to keep them running correctly. I looked around, taking one of my headphones out of my ear. I picked up my big stick and went to do my rounds. Whenever the monitor went out, it was my job to walk into every area of the building to check on things and ensure there were no intruders. Labs were on the 6th floor, and I was not authorized to go in that area. I was also told that if anything happened in that area, to lock the area and leave immediately. That was the only protocol that I was aware of that sounded menacing. As far as I knew, they were a research facility that did cosmetic testing under the Dulce. I was never privy to what type of cosmetic research, but I imagined something with monkeys or chimps, like in those movies. I learned later it was no such thing. I went towards the elevators and went up to the 2nd floor. I smelled something strange when the elevators opened onto the 2nd floor. I walked into the glassy hallway floor that had been mopped before the cleaning crew left. I took out both of my headphones now and listened. Something was coming down the long hall toward me, but I couldn't determine what it was. I couldn't see anything either. Fuck. Finally, a bird flew out and over my head. Whew. I breathed a sigh of relief and assumed it came through the parking garage elevator. I continued my rounds of the large building and returned to my round desk. I sat eating Snyder barbecue chips while I stared at the computer monitor. When I looked at the 6th monitor, I noticed it was back on. I was there for an hour when I decided to get up and stretch my feet. I had some songs blasting in my ears, a mix of new age and alternative rock. Krista had a very, very unusual taste in music, but I usually enjoyed most of the stuff she sent me back when I lived in the dorms. I looked forward to receiving her mixed discs as the only thing worth looking forward to back then. Between work and school, there wasn't really much else. I stood, taking my headphones out of my ears. I looked around. It was eerily quiet for a Saturday night in the city. Not one single car had gone down the street. I didn't see the usual homeless guys trying to get me to give them money or let them in to cool off or warm up, depending on the weather. I tried not to let myself feel too uneasy. The building moaned, and electricity went out. I walked over to the monitors and everything was off. I looked out the window and realized not one city light was working, not even one public transportation vehicle either. It was the cliché ghost town at that moment. Shit. I walked towards the front of the building and ensured the doors were manually locked. I took out my flashlight to make my second rounds for the night. As I walked towards the stairs, given the elevators were not working, I ran up the first flight. A generator usually came on the next few floors, but more seemed to need fixing. It didn't come on at all. I got a stupid thought. With the cameras, security, and everything off, I could sneak into the 6th floor and see what they hid up there. When would I ever get the chance again? I mean, what can I say? I was a stupid 19-year-old with a ton of time to kill. This would be another 8 hours with no electricity. There wasn't even a monitor to stare at. I went up the 12 flights to get there, and when I saw the door, the floor opened to a small lobby with a nicer vending machine than the one I had to use. I was totally game. I walked over to look at the goodies inside of it. I shook it a bit, and some Doritos fell into the bottom when I did. I swiped them up quickly and opened the bag. I looked ahead at the 2 giant steel doors. "Authorized clearance only" was written on both of them. I'm authorized clearance, aren't I? I put another bunch of chips in my mouth and opened the doors. There was a red blinking light on the walls, which I assumed was for emergencies like this one. The city would get the power back on quickly, and my time here to investigate would be short-lived. I put the bag of chips on a desk that was there when you walked in. There was another set of doors when I got in, and I turned my flashlight towards them. It was hard to see them because the doors were painted black. I smiled, a bit too excited for words, and tried to open the door. It didn't open. I looked at the wall, seeing there was a place you had to slide a card. I wondered if my security badge would work in this area too. I swiped it, and whoosh! The doors opened slowly in front of me. There must have been enough electricity back up to use the swipe card. The air inside the lab was incredibly cold, and I saw gas masks on the wall inside an area to disinfect yourself when you went in or out. I put on one of their gowns and masks. It was stupid. I mean, I was pretty stupid, but not that stupid, so I put on the gown. I didn't want to bring any diseases out into the world, like in that movie, the one with the monkey, the one that escaped. Yeah, I didn't want to be that guy. I hit the switch to pour down the disinfectant on me. It was weird, but I felt like I was in a movie. I walked into the lab between some plastic curtains, and depending on where I walked, there was now some light that looked glow in the dark that glimmered on and off. I looked ahead of me and could see some small cages. 2 of them had rats nibbling on food in a tiny bowl. They didn't look weird to me. I walked further, and as I slowly moved into the lab, I noticed it became darker. What the hell was in here? I started to smell something that made me wish I wasn't smelling it. Curiosity still gripping me, and I kept moving into the lab, eyeing my surroundings with my limited vision. Boom! Something hit the glass near me. And when I shined my flashlight near it, I noticed something that looked like a baboon, only its face was more of a kangaroo look, and kind of had a muzzle like a dog's. It was eyeing me with red eyes. And while I didn't look particularly menacing, it seemed hungry. I felt bad for it being here all by itself, this weird baboon dog. Hey, sorry, buddy. What are you anyway? I asked, looking at it. Then I saw something that looked like shit behind it smeared against the wall. I chuckled. It was you making that smell, wasn't it? I bet it was. Knowing I couldn't do anything about it at the time, I figured the lab crew that worked weekends clean it up and feed the poor creature. I felt terrible for it, but was secretly glad it couldn't come to get me. I moved away from that cage, and then I had another cell. There was a couple with nothing inside the glass cages, which made me happy. It was sad to see the animals in those cages, though. Then, I got closer to the back of the laboratory. There were several enormous cages. They were all made of glass, and all looked as if they had things inside of them. I approached the cage closest to me and saw a large, furry hand hit the cage. I stepped back, accidentally turning on my CD player. Some rock music blasted into my ears, startling me once again. I quickly hit the pause button on the player and backed away. I could no longer see what was in the large glass cage. Then my eyes turned toward one. Strange. As I walked towards it, motion light came on. There, in front of me, was a man wearing all black, sitting with his back turned towards me in a chair. This was weird to me. Was this guy real? There was no way they were keeping a guy in this glass cage. I mean, wouldn't that be a crime? Hey, buddy, do you work here or something? I asked. I wasn't sure if he was an employee that maybe accidentally locked himself in there. It was too sinister to me that he should be here all alone in the dark like a lab experiment. The man did not turn to look at me. I thought maybe he couldn't hear me behind the thick glass. Hey, you work here? Do you need help? I yelled and banged on the cage. He tilted his head up, but did not look at me. Are you locked in there? I asked again. The man still wouldn't move, and I felt extremely creeped out. Suddenly, my walkie-talkie began to turn on, and I heard static. I was alone, so I wasn't sure who would be trying to talk to me. Then I thought it was maintenance trying to reach me to check on the building. As I was staring at the man still in the chair, I didn't immediately notice that I was being felt up by something. Suddenly, I felt my leg being grabbed, and when I turned around, a tall, beast-like animal stood in front of me. It had opened the cage door next to the man. It was tall with pointed ears like a jackal. It had black eyes and teeth. I barely felt my leg being grabbed again as the creature in front of me grabbed a giant tentacle, wrapping itself around me, and snapped it in half, eating the part it had seized. I backed away again and hit the side of the cage with a baboon dog inside. I saw it change from looking sweet to going completely insane. I ran towards the other part of the lab to where the man had been sitting. Maybe he could help me. He was no longer there. I fell backward to the ground, realizing I had made a colossal mistake. The creature that looked half jackal and half bear was now fixated on the giant tentacles that seemed to come from the back of the laboratory. I got up as best as possible, grabbed my Walkman, and left the lab. I didn't bother to disinfect my body. I just ran, shutting and trying to lock the doors behind me. I kept running until I got to the 2 big doors. I grabbed my Doritos off the table, thinking if I needed to, I could use them to fend off creatures if they escaped. I mean, who doesn't love Doritos? I ran down the stairs to the lobby as fast as my feet could. I went to my desk and picked up the phone. I was going to call the head of my security company. I knew that those doors wouldn't open and they wouldn't hold for long, but eventually they would open. Incredibly, that big bear thing, or that baboon dog. Shit. For the love of God, what had tentacles? My brain was trying to wrap its head around when I looked at the wall behind me. A man was standing there in the dark. I thought about the man I had seen in the lab. I realized it was the same man. "Hey, are you all right?" I asked him. He didn't seem to respond. Instead, he just kept walking toward me slowly. I stood there feeling as afraid as if I were still in that lab. The man stopped halfway, tilting his head as Michael Myers did in those Halloween movies. I gulped, knowing that something was way off about this guy. I went to ask him again if he was all right, but my voice cracked and squeaked like I was going through puberty again. I heard something fall to the floor behind me and turned my head for only a second to see that it was one of those tiny rats that seemed to be carrying something that, like, jangled keys. I stood up off the ground and then ran away into the dark. I turned my eyes back to the man that was in front of me to find him, you guessed it, gone. Where the hell did he go? I was beginning to think I didn't need to be so concerned for him. I turned around in a full circle, remembering my flashlight, only to realize I had left it in the fucking lab. There was some light coming from the moon shining in the lab. It had grown pitch black outside from the city blackout. I began to think I needed to get out of there, but I also needed to call for help. I didn't know where the man had gone and feared what he might do. I scrambled to get to the phone on the other side of my desk. When I did, I realized the line had been cut. This was turning into the worst night of my life. I looked up to the front of the building. My only luck would be escaping out of those front doors. I ran towards them and went to unlock them when I realized I no longer had the damn keys. I looked around and then remembered that damn rat and had picked up something that jangled like keys, as in my keys. Fuck. I put my head in my hand and tried to think of how I would get out of this mess that I was in. That is when I felt something behind me. I knew what it was. The thing with tentacles was now wrapping its body around mine. I was afraid to turn around, and when I did, the fear inside me did not disappoint. In front of me was a vast-eyed creature that looked like it had the head of a ball sack. I'm sorry, but that's the best description I have. It really looked like that. This thing's mouth had sharp teeth in a round circle, and when it opened, I saw a never-ending series of mini saws rearing to lash and cut flesh. It tucked its tongue with smaller tongue at the tip of it near my face and licked my cheek, taking a sliver of my flesh with it. The tentacles it sat upon excreted a foul-smelling odor as it did. I nearly died from the smell, and part of me wished I had. It tossed me against the glass of the door and pushed me into the glass windows. I couldn't move, and my breathing was so shallow from the shock of this thing. It had no eyes. I could see it in the dark, but It had holes above its mouth, with small hair-like bristles. I heard something behind me and realized that the glass window directly behind me was beginning to crack from the force this thing had against me. It pushed and pushed until it had unzipped my pants, eating the pants right off of me. I watched, wide-eyed, as it slid me to the floor, curling its long tentacles around me to hold me to the ground while it sniffed my lower region. I could only hope for my manhood to remain intact as it licked and ripped at my flesh. It seemed to grow very excited by my smell. If only Teresa in freshman Victorian lit has been as king on my lower region. I heard a scream, and as I felt it hurl my legs in front of me, nearly cracking them as it sniffed and licked my body, I heard my Walkman kick on. I was not focused on the pain so much as the voice in my ears. I can't explain it. It was the only thing keeping me from thinking of my impending death. PJ Harvey was singing "We Float" as this menacing creature tormented my body. I could no longer open my eyes, as if I saw it. The pain would become real. I felt like one of those people that pay someone to walk on their backs with heels to feel alive. I had my eyes closed, feeling the pinch of my skin, the prodding of my loins by its intrusive mouth. I nearly lost it from lack of breath. The pain was only getting worse, and I could feel the blood from being skinned alive. It peeled layer after layer of the skin on my upper thigh away. Then, as soon as it started, I felt it stop and drop me where it was. I opened my eyes to see it recoiling in the dark. Something had caused it to be afraid. Great. What was waiting in the dark would soon be after me too? The music was still playing in my ears when I went to stand up. I felt like I had been crushed to death, and all the bones in my body were now dust. I was alive, and I didn't have any broken bones. I had managed to try and stand while I slipped and fell in my own blood. I was bleeding, and the music was still going in my ears when I hit the pause button. The room had grown quiet now. I watched the dark, waiting for the next intruder to look for me. It didn't take long. Several monsters came running from the door leading to the stairwell. I panicked, trying to get out of the way when the glass above me suddenly shattered. It caused an uproar among the monsters, and they seemed confused about what that sound had been. Then I saw someone approaching the thing that had nearly licked me to death using a cattle prod. I looked at it, began to back away from someone standing in the dark. The baboon dog was now next to me, trying to run away, but kept stepping on the glass covering the floor. The cattle prod was used on the baboon, and he recoiled in fear. There were at least several things that resembled demons from a horror movie. One had scales, and the other was the man. He stood there wrangling the creatures back into the stairwell. Then as they went back in, the door shut on them. The man came over to me, still holding the cattle prod. I saw him smile at me. Then he used the cattle prod on me too, and I blacked out. When I awoke, all the creatures were back in their cages. I realized to my horror I was in a glass cage. The man had put me in his cell. I looked down at the front of the cage where it was labeled. It read, "Pure Sociopath." I didn't register at first. Then I thought about why he might be in this cage. What had he done? What were they using him to create? I saw the lights come back on. The man had an ashen face and jet black hair. He didn't talk. He put his index finger to his lips and simply told me to shh. He backed out into the night. I pulled out the Doritos I had in my pocket and ate them. They were crumbs now, but it was better than starving, I guess. I hit play on my CD player and dissected each song verse. I thought how cool it was. Krista had made this playlist to get me through a boring night at work, In reality, she got me through a near-death experience. I was only there a few hours before one of the laboratory assistants saw me and rescued me. I had to sign papers, and I was let go, never allowed to come within a mile of Dolce Laboratories again. Trust me, I didn't want to. I did wonder about the pure sociopath. Where had that guy gone? I had no doubt he'd found a way to create a new life outside of that glass cage. I just hoped he was far, far away. I had a feeling, though, he wouldn't be too far away. He wasn't done with me yet. There was this playful look in his eyes when he left me in that cage, as if he was saying he'd see me again soon. Perhaps, perhaps not. Years passed, and I grew up, got a job in Austin, Texas. I forgot my misspent youth, yet I always remembered PJ Harvey. I think she saved me that day. If I hadn't had her music distracting me, I have no doubt I'd be dead from the horror of it. So thanks, PJ. Thank you for getting me through.